Okay, we are back again and we're going to bake our cookies today. I've already preset our oven at 350 degrees, so it is good and hot. Just a minute ago, I took out our dough that we had made yesterday. And we are going to get ready to roll out the dough. Now, do not roll out the whole thing at one time. It gets to be a little too much. Now, in order to not make a mess on our counter here, I'm going to lay down some plastic. If I just lay down the sheet of plastic on this, it would slide on the counter as I'm trying to roll out the dough. So this is a very damp cloth, and I'm going to just dampen the counter and put down my piece of plastic. And the water will keep the plastic in place as we roll out our dough. Flatten it out. To break off a chunk of the dough. And I'll put the rest back in the refrigerator. This dough you can make up to about a week ahead of time. And if you want nice warm cookies every time you bake, just bake part of your dough and leave the rest in the refrigerator. You will need a little flour on your surface so that your dough does not stick. Cold dough is a little tough to start out with. So you have to treat it like modeling clay to get a nice flat disc. And we want to get flour on both the top and the underneath side. So we will need a little more flour. And this is my favorite rolling pin. It may look different from the rolling pin that you have at home, but I prefer to roll with my hands flat against the rolling pin than to use little handles. But it's whatever you're used to, and whatever you have at home will work just fine. And starting from the center, work your way out. After you've made a couple of rolls, move your dough. Start from the center, work your way out. And the reason you keep moving your dough is to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom, that you're getting just enough flour on there. My dough is wanting to break apart because it's still good and cold. If it does break apart, just squish it together. And we're going to roll this to about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch thick. That's how thick I like my cookies. You can make them a little thicker, but they will take longer to bake if you do that. Okay, it's about as thick as I like it. And this is my baking sheet, what they call a baking pan. On the baking pan or sheet, I have a sheet of parchment paper. You'll want to cut the parchment paper to the same size as the pan, because if you don't, you have stuff sticking over the edge. This will blow in the oven and land on top of your cookies, and it could ruin your cookies. So always make it the same size as your pan, or as close to that as you can. Now you know that I have a lot of different shapes of cookie cutters, and I enjoy making different shapes for you guys. But if you don't have any cookie cutters at home, it's okay. You can use a biscuit cutter, or you can just use a knife, and I don't have one here, so we're just going to use the side of a fork and make squares or different shapes. And it will cook up just the same. So whatever you have at home is great. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy anything special for this recipe. So we're going to set some of our cookies, even our big circle cookie and our funky cutout cookie, on our pan. We'll make a few extras. And after you've run out of space to cut your cookies on your dough, it's okay to fold the dough back in on itself. Make another round ball and flatten it out again and continue cutting cookies. The recipe that we worked on yesterday will make anywhere from 24 to 36 cookies, depending on how flat you make the dough or how thin. So I'm going to use up most of this dough. As you see, I'm still turning it to make sure that it doesn't stick on my plastic. We'll make some more big circles. And since this dough does not rise and get much larger than what it is, you can put more cookies on the pan and you can put them closer together. Okay, so we've got our pan full of cookies, and they're going to go into the oven. For about 10 to 12 minutes. So I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to go ahead and put 12 minutes and enter. At that time, I will turn on the light and I will check on the cookies to make sure that they are well cooked and have just a thin layer of golden brown around the outside. So we'll be back in about 12 minutes. Now we're going to make the icing that we usually have on our cookies. This icing is very, very simple, and actually I don't measure anything, which for some people might be a little frightening, but that's okay. Starting out with powdered sugar, and I'm making a very small batch. I usually make a much larger batch when you guys are here. Flavoring is going to be vanilla, and we want just a little bit because it does not take much liquid to make the icing at all. So we're going to put that in first. Then the only other ingredient we have is milk. Now remember, just a little bit, because you can always add more, but you can't take any of the milk out if it gets too thin. And stir it up really well after each addition of liquid. I think we may be already there. This does look a little tan, but that's because of the color of the vanilla. They do make a clear vanilla, which I sometimes use to make the icing very white, but still give you the same flavor of the vanilla. Okay, this is a good consistency for our cookies. So we're going to set this aside. Now, if you like your cookies colors, use the clear vanilla for your flavoring, or else almond flavoring, and you'll start out with a white. And then you can use food coloring colors, and comes in 4 different colors, and you can mix and match to make other colors. But you got to remember that some people have food allergies and are quite allergic to the coloring. So that's it on these, and you still have to wait for the cookies to come out and to cool a little bit, and we'll be ready to ice them. Okay, our timer is going off. We'll turn off our timer, turn on our oven light, and we look pretty darn good. So we're going to turn off our oven, turn off our light, and here's our cookies. So they're nice golden brown around the edge. You see how they've kept their shape? So you can see our little one that we cut out. And normally I wait a minute or two before I take them off the pan, but we're going to go ahead and put it on our cooling rack, and that's what this thing is called. Helps the cookies to cool faster, because if you leave them on the pan is still very hot. You may need help getting it out of the oven. The cookies would continue to cook along the bottom. Putting it on the cooling rack puts air up underneath, and they will cool much faster and will not continue to cook. So there are our cookies. And if you're cooking more cookies, make sure that your pan cools down before you put the cookies on there, because otherwise they will melt and they won't keep their shape as well. So I do have some cooled cookies that we can go ahead and ice. So let me put this away. Here are our cooled cookies. You can see we have a heart, and we have a 4-leaf clover for 4H. So there's our icing, and we'll put some over the top. This icing is a little smooth and runny so that we can spread it easily. If you were wanting to decorate the cookies, you might want to make your icing a little bit thicker. but this looks pretty good to me. And we do have some of our sprinkles. And we always use a spoon or something to take it out of the container. Never put your fingers in the container. And we make a pretty little cookie for us to enjoy while we have our story. All right, so now it's at the end of the meeting and it's time for our story. The book that I'm reading from is quite an old book because my father would read to us from this book. So the book is probably going on 60 years old, but we won't go there. But this is one of my favorite stories. This one is called The Princess and the Pea by Hans Christian Andersen. There once was a prince who wished to marry a princess, but then she must be a real princess. He traveled all over the world in hopes of finding such a lady. Here he traveled to France and Egypt, Babylon, India, England, Greece, and Germany. But there was always something wrong. Princesses he found in plenty, but whether they were real princesses, it was impossible for him to decide. For now the one thing, now another, seemed to be not quite right about the ladies. At last he returned to his palace quite cast down, because he wished so much to have a real princess for his wife. One evening, a fearful tempest arose. It thundered and lightened, and the rain poured down from the sky in torrents. Besides, it was as dark as pitch. All at once, there was a voice heard and violent knocking at the door, and the old king, the prince's father, went out himself to open it. It was a princess who was standing outside the door. What with the rain and the wind, she was in such a sad condition. The water trickled down from her hair, and her clothes clung to her body. She said she was a real princess. Ah, we shall soon see that, thought the old queen mother. However, she said not a word of what she was going to do, but went into the bedroom, took all the bedclothes off of the bed, and put 3 peas on the bedstead. That would be the frame of the bed. She then laid 20 mattresses, one upon another, over the 3 peas, and put 20 feather beds over the mattresses. Look how high that is. The next morning she asked how the princess had slept. Oh, very badly indeed, she replied. I have scarcely closed my eyes the whole night through. I do not know what was in my bed, but I had something hard under me and am all over black and blue. It hurt me so much. Now it was plain that the lady must be a real princess, since she had been able to feel the 3 tiny little peas through 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds. None but a real princess could have had such delicate sense of feeling. The prince accordingly made her his wife, being now convinced that he had found a real princess. The 3 peas were, however, put into a cabinet of curiosities, where they are still to be seen, provided they were not lost. Wasn't this a lady of real delicacy? The end.